Okay, take your Bibles out. I'm kind of like the preacher who said that his sermons were kind of like baloney. You could just cut them off wherever you needed to. So we may have to cut this one off tonight. But I want you to go with me to Joshua chapter 6. Joshua chapter 6, and we're talking about the conquest at Jericho. All right? The conquest begins. I want you to listen to this quote because some of you may struggle with this, but I do believe it's true. You are a poor soldier of Christ if you think you can overcome without fighting. And suppose you can have the crown without the conflict. Now that was a quote by a martyr by the name of John Chrysostom, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. I do believe that he was right. We all know that we have enemies in the Christian life. The world, the flesh, and the devil. And our enemies are doing everything that they can to oppose the work of God in this world. The same thing was true for the children of Israel. They had enemies in the land, the Canaanites and all those, I call them Ite people, the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Ammonites. They had all those enemies who were warring against the Jewish nation. And so, kind of reminds me of the story I heard of a pastor who went to a court hearing one day, and they were building a bar, and the bar was going to be close to his church and also close to a public school. And so he went to the hearing. I'm sure you've probably done that before or heard of that. And the attorney for the bar said to the pastor, he said, Reverend, as a pastor, aren't you supposed to be shepherding the sheep and taking care of the sheep? The pastor looked at the attorney and said, today I'm fighting the wolf. And he was exactly right. Now I want to share with you as we think about the victory at Jericho. This is a great story about how God, ladies and gentlemen, He supernaturally, God did this. He allowed His children to defeat the people of Jericho. They did not have the ability to do that without God's help. So I want to share a couple things with you. If you've got your Bibles there, Joshua chapter 6. Mr. Billy, I'm just going to read because I've only got one microphone tonight. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. Now, if you go back and study the Old Testament and their war efforts, you know that whenever a city came under siege, the attacking force would typically surround the city and they would cut off any kind of flow into or flow out of. And literally, it's not a pretty sight. They'd really just starve them out. And so that's kind of the picture you see of what's going on at Jericho. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, now I want you to notice this. This is the crux of what we're going to talk about tonight. Listen to what God said. Listen to what He said to Joshua. See, I want you to notice the tense of the verb. I have given Jericho into your hand. Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that this was a done deal before Israel ever did anything? God was going to do it. Now, I know Miss Gale's here. That's past tense, isn't it? I studied English and I had a hard time. I have given. That's already in the past. I want you to know that as a Christian tonight, you do not fight just for victory, you fight from victory. Now I want you to let that sink in for just a minute. Do you realize that God's already won the war? I mean, Jesus Christ has died on the cross. He's risen from the dead. The victory has already been won. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not fighting for victory. We are fighting from victory. It's a done deal. We just need to claim it and realize it and walk in it. And so a couple of things I want you to notice, and real quickly, because I'm already starting to look at my clock. A couple of things I want you to remember. Number one, the fear of the Lord. Now remember, Israel has crossed the Jordan River. It was the Jordan, wasn't it? Whew. It's terrible to get old, y'all. They've crossed the river. They are about 2 miles from the city of Jericho, okay? They stopped. They had their worship service. They paused there for a few days. But now remember, news of what God had done for Israel preceded them. I mean, the people of Jericho, you remember when we looked at this, the people of Jericho were scared in their shoes because they had not only heard about Israel, they had heard about Israel's God. The fear of the Lord. Let me ask you, do you think that there's some folks out there in the world that are afraid of what God's people might do in 2021? I don't sense that a lot. And to be honest with you, the sad truth is because mainly in the church, we haven't done anything to display God's power. And they know that. Listen, folks that don't go to Bay Springs, don't you know they know what goes on here? That's that way in every church. They know exactly, because they listen to you when you go out and when you talk. They're listening to what you say. And they know if God's doing anything here. And to be frank with you, we live in a world that just hasn't seen the power of God displayed like it should be in the church. The church is no longer terrible as an army with banners. In fact, I hate to say this, it's the truth, but we've become so much like the world that we really don't have much influence in the world. And ladies and gentlemen, if we really want to influence this world, then we're going to have to be different from them. We can't do business the way the world does and then expect them to fall on their faces in fear of our God. So the fear of God, the fear of the Lord is one thing, and then the promise of the Lord. And we've already kind of dealt with that. God said to Joshua, I have given into your hand Jericho. And all they had to do was go and claim that victory. Now, you know how that all worked out. They went to Jericho. They marched around the city one time a day for 6 days. And then the seventh day, they marched around the city 7 times. They blew their horns and shouted. Now, the city of Jericho, great thing. When you go study the excavations from that city, they had 2 walls. That's why those 10 spies who checked out the land years before, Jericho was one of the reasons why they said they would not be able to take the land. They had 2 walls, about 15 feet apart. And everybody would look at that and they'd say, well, you can't penetrate that. You can't win that battle. But they didn't factor in our God. Ladies and gentlemen, don't leave God out of your plans. Don't factor him out. Because I can promise you that Israel would have never won this battle on their own strength. You and I will never live successful Christian lives on our own strength. We got to get to where we need to be with the Lord. I want you to think about that. And I want you to pray about that, okay? I was going to say pray with me, but we need to talk about some prayer concerns. All right, Brother Doug, I'm trying not to take up your choir practice time. A couple of prayer concerns to keep in mind. Bates Gilmore, add him to your prayer list. He had shoulder surgery in Birmingham. He and Linda are home. I haven't spoken